This all started in March, when my husband Peter, 39, began acting strangely with our finances. We've been married for 7 years and always had a clear system. We each contributed to our joint account for bills and savings while keeping personal accounts for our own spending. The first red flag appeared when I went to transfer money into our annual vacation fund. The balance was about $12,000 lower than expected. When I asked Peter about it, he became defensive and claimed he'd been sending money to his mother, Janice, 68, for medical treatments not covered by insurance. His mom lives 3 hours away, and while we aren't very close, we've always gotten along. Given her history of health issues, his explanation seemed believable. When I suggested visiting her, Peter shut it down immediately, saying she was embarrassed and didn't want company. Over the next few months, more money disappeared. Whenever I brought it up, Peter grew upset and insisted his mom's treatment wasn't working and they needed to try something else. He'd even say things like, "Do you want my mother to die?" whenever I questioned the amounts. That left me feeling guilty, so I stopped pressing. By August, another $30,000 was gone, money we'd been saving for a new house. Concerned, I asked Peter for details about Janice's condition. His answers were vague: specialized treatments and alternative therapies, but no specifics. That night, I checked our joint account while he slept. The transfers were going to an unfamiliar account, not to Janice. The next morning, I confronted him. He claimed the money was being sent to his brother Tobias, who was handling their mom's care. But that didn't make sense. Tobias and Janice have never been close, and Peter barely speaks to him after a long-standing family dispute. The story didn't add up. I decided to dig deeper. In Peter's desk, I found a hidden credit card statement with $18,000 in debt I knew nothing about. Most charges were for hotels, restaurants, and expensive gifts from Tiffany's. Unless his mother was staying at luxury resorts while undergoing treatment, something was clearly wrong. In October, Peter left his phone unlocked. Normally, I don't snoop, but by then, nearly $60,000 was missing. I opened his messages and found a thread with someone saved as KP Work Project. The exchange revealed everything. Peter had transferred $5,000 to her, and she replied with, "OMG, thank you, baby. Can't wait to see you Friday." They joked about me, called me gullible, and openly discussed using our savings to fund a condo together. KP Work Project wasn't his mom. It was Kayla, a 22-year-old blonde who'd been sending him lingerie photos. I realized they had been seeing each other for almost a year, spending our house savings on their relationship. I knew I couldn't confront him without evidence, so I reached out to Janice. She was shocked. She hadn't been sick at all. In fact, she'd just returned from a cruise. I invited her to stay with us under the pretense of surprising Peter for our anniversary. She agreed. For a week, I acted as though everything was normal, while Peter continued transferring money. Finally, on Friday, I picked up Janice from the train station. Together, we waited for Peter. When he walked in and saw his healthy mother sitting with bank statements spread out, his face went white. I asked him sweetly if the last $3,000 transfer had been enough for her treatments. Janice stood and asked what treatments he was talking about, since she hadn't been sick. Peter broke down and admitted everything: the affair, the money, all of it. He claimed it was a mistake, but Janice wasn't having it. She told him he was no son of hers, that his father would be ashamed, and that she was cutting him out of her will. I calmly told him to leave. I had already packed his bag and contacted Tobias, who confirmed Peter had never sent him money. Peter left that night. I changed the locks, froze our accounts, and called a divorce attorney. Since then, Peter has been texting from his brother's couch. His messages swing from apologies to anger to desperation. Kayla apparently left him as soon as the money stopped. I haven't replied. My attorney advised me to document everything but not engage. I've been staying with my sister, Luna, while I plan next steps. I keep thinking about all the months I believed him, feeling guilty for questioning him, thinking I was helping save his mother's life, while in reality, he and Kayla mocked me. My lawyer says we may be able to recover some of the money, but it will take time. Janice has been calling daily, furious at her son, and she's promised to testify if needed. She even apologized to me, saying she felt responsible for raising him. As for Peter, his relatives keep insisting I should hear him out. But after lies, betrayal, and nearly $85,000 gone, I don't see what he could possibly say that would change things. The cabin has been in my family for generations, yet I discovered Peter and Kayla had been using it as their getaway. There were photos of them inside, drinking my grandparents' vintage wine collection. In one message, Peter even told Kayla they should renovate the cabin once it became theirs after our divorce. I didn't reply to Kayla's message directly. Instead, I forwarded everything to my lawyer, Lisa, who said the evidence was valuable but advised me not to contact Kayla again. She explained that Kayla might only be reaching out to protect herself, since alienation of affection is still a valid claim in our state. The next morning, Luna and I drove to the cabin. The place was trashed. Empty bottles, dirty sheets, spoiled food. It was clear they had been using it for months. I found women's clothing in the dresser that wasn't mine, and a notebook full of renovation plans, including contractor estimates and material samples. I spent the day cleaning and securing the cabin. I changed the locks, installed cameras, and made an inventory of what was missing. Among the stolen items were my grandfather's fishing gear and some of my grandmother's jewelry. About $5,000 in value, but priceless to me. While we were there, Peter called Luna's phone. He's blocked on mine. He first sounded desperate, insisting he needed to talk. But when he learned we were at the cabin, his tone shifted to anger. He claimed I had no right to change the locks and threatened to call the police if I didn't hand over the keys. Luna reminded him the cabin had been in my family for 3 generations, and his name was on none of the documents. He hung up. 20 minutes later, his car pulled into the driveway. Luna and I locked the doors and shut the blinds. Peter pounded on the door, shouting to be let in, then tried his key and circled the cabin, looking for another way inside. I called the sheriff, who arrived 15 minutes later. By then, Peter was sitting in his car, refusing to leave. I showed the sheriff the deed proving the cabin was family property, not marital property, and explained the divorce and financial restraining order. The sheriff advised me to file for a protective order, noting Peter seemed unusually fixated on the cabin. That night, we stayed there with deputies patrolling nearby. In the morning, we found Peter's car parked just down the road. He was asleep inside. The sheriff returned and warned him he'd be arrested for trespassing if he came back. Back in town, I filed for a protective order. While filling out the paperwork, I received an email from Peter's work account with the subject, "What I found." Attached was a photo of a storage unit key and the words, "I know everything." At first, I was confused. Then I remembered my dad's storage unit, where he kept family heirlooms and documents after downsizing. I had a spare key, and Peter must have taken it. I called my dad immediately, but he didn't answer. My stepmom finally picked up and told me they were at the unit because they'd received an alert about unauthorized access. When they arrived, the lock had been changed. I rushed to the facility and found police already on site. Security footage showed Peter entering with my key and leaving with boxes just hours after he left the cabin. Among the stolen items were photo albums, my late mother's jewelry meant for me, and important family documents, including the cabin deed. The police took a report, but since Peter is technically my husband and I had given him access to the key, they said pursuing theft charges might be difficult. That night, Peter emailed again. "We need to talk about what happens next. Meet me tomorrow, or I start selling things." Attached was a photo of my mother's engagement ring. I forwarded everything to Lisa and the investigating officer. Lisa warned me not to meet him alone, but said we could arrange something at her office with security present. The officer said they'd work on getting a warrant to search his brother's home for the stolen items. Currently, I'm staying in a hotel Peter doesn't know about. Only Luna and my parents know where I am. The protective order hearing is scheduled for tomorrow, and Lisa believes we have a strong case. I still can't believe how quickly my life unraveled. Just 3 weeks ago, I thought I was in a stable marriage. Now, I'm hiding in a hotel while my husband steals family heirlooms and threatens to sell my mother's jewelry. At the hearing, I arrived early with Lisa. My dad texted that Peter was pacing in the parking lot. Court security monitored him, but couldn't act until he entered the building. When he did, he came with a lawyer, sharp suit, expensive look. They sat across the waiting area, and Peter kept staring at me. His lawyer tried to negotiate before the hearing, but Lisa refused. Inside, I described everything: the financial theft, break-ins, storage unit incident, and threats. The judge asked detailed questions about the timeline and whether Peter had ever been violent. I explained that while he hadn't been physically abusive, his behavior had become erratic and intimidating. Peter's lawyer painted him as a devoted husband who made a single mistake. He claimed Peter only went to the cabin for upkeep and took the storage items because he feared I'd hide or destroy them. Then Peter spoke, apologizing for Kayla, but insisting I was overreacting. He said he'd already broken things off and returned most of the money. Claims that weren't true. When it was my turn, I showed the judge screenshots of Peter mocking me with Kayla and bank records proving no money had been returned. After reviewing the evidence, the judge granted a 90-day protective order. Peter cannot contact me except through lawyers and must stay at least 100 yards away from me, my workplace, Luna's house, and my parents' home. He was also ordered to return all stolen property within 48 hours. That night, I received a DM from Kayla. She said Peter had been harassing her since their breakup, showing up at her apartment and job, demanding she convince me they weren't together. She wanted to meet because there were things I needed to know. Kayla looked different in person than I expected. Instead of confident and glamorous, she seemed nervous and overwhelmed. She apologized again, claiming Peter told her we were separated. When I asked why she stayed after learning the truth, she admitted Peter convinced her they were meant to be and that I was the obstacle. She also revealed Peter hadn't only been draining our accounts. He had taken out loans in both our names using fake emails so I wouldn't see the approvals. She showed texts between them about loan terms and payments. That meant at least another $40,000 in hidden debt. On top of that, Peter had already put a deposit on a condo, telling the agent I'd sign the papers later. It was meant to be Kayla's birthday surprise. Kayla said she finally came forward because Peter had grown controlling and aggressive, even pressuring her to take loans in her own name. When she refused, he threatened to expose her to her conservative parents. I wasn't sure how much of her story to trust, but the information about the loans was important. Luna reminded me that whatever Kayla's motives, this was evidence I needed to investigate. After leaving Kayla, she handed me a small box. Inside were earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. Peter had given them to her, pretending they were heirlooms from his family. The next day, I met with Lisa and showed her everything Kayla provided. She immediately began investigating the loans and confirmed Peter had taken out 3 personal loans totaling $42,000 using our joint information. Lisa filed emergency motions to add this evidence to our divorce proceedings and financial restraining order. Around the same time, my dad called to say some of the items stolen from the storage unit had been returned. They'd been left on his porch in a box with no explanation. Unfortunately, my mother's engagement ring and several other valuable items were still missing. 2 days after the protective order was issued, I returned to our house with a police escort to gather more belongings. The house looked even worse than before, as though Peter had been living there despite the locks being changed. There were food containers, clothes everywhere, and the smell of alcohol lingered. The officers explained they couldn't legally stop him from entering, since his name was still on the deed, even though the order prevented him from contacting me. While packing, I noticed something odd on the bedroom wall. Our wedding photo frame was crooked, and the wall behind it looked suspicious. I removed it and discovered a patched hole where Peter had once installed a wall safe for passports and emergency cash. The safe was gone, completely removed and covered over. The officer documented it as potential financial misconduct. Though he explained Peter hadn't technically broken the law by removing it, since he was a co-owner of the house. Still, it showed he had been steadily taking things while I was away. That evening, Peter's brother Tobias called me. He said Peter had shown up at his house drunk the night before, ranting that I had ruined everything and vowing to make sure I got nothing in the divorce. Tobias grew alarmed when Peter mentioned insurance policies and leverage over me. He admitted he had originally believed Peter's version of events, that I'd overreacted to a brief affair. But after witnessing his behavior and learning about the missing money, Tobias no longer felt comfortable having him there. He asked Peter to leave, which led to a heated argument. Before ending the call, Tobias mentioned Peter had been meeting with unfamiliar business contacts. When questioned, Peter claimed they were helping him protect his assets from me. On Friday, Lisa called with news. The court had fast-tracked our financial discovery due to the fraud evidence, and Peter's accounts were frozen during the investigation. His lawyer suddenly requested a settlement meeting, a major shift from their earlier combative approach. Lisa believed they realized how damaging the evidence looked, especially the loan fraud and Peter's attempts to access my retirement funds. She advised me to attend, but cautioned not to expect full recovery of the stolen money, much of which had likely been spent on Kayla, the condo deposit, and other hidden expenses. The settlement was scheduled for Monday. That weekend, I prepared with Luna's help. She stayed with me at the hotel, organizing documents and keeping me grounded. Late Sunday night, I got a text from Janice. She'd received a call from Rosalind, saying Peter had shown up at her home agitated and talking about leaving town. I forwarded this to Lisa, who said she'd notify the court. By Monday morning, I was anxious. Luna drove me to Lisa's office early, and we sat in the parking lot trying to stay calm. At 9 a.m., Lisa called to say she was inside with Peter's lawyer, but Peter hadn't shown up. We went in anyway. His lawyer, Mr. Zane, admitted he hadn't been able to reach Peter since the previous night. Lisa suggested beginning discussions while waiting, though the tension in the room was clear. Half an hour later, Lisa's assistant interrupted with a call from the police. Maintenance staff had entered my apartment for a reported leak and discovered major damage. I went with the police to see it. Everything inside had been destroyed. Furniture slashed, oil poured over carpets and bedding, photos smashed, electronics broken. On the living room wall, someone had written the words, "Stupid pig," the same insult Peter had used in his text. Police documented the destruction, while Lisa contacted the judge's office to request an emergency hearing for violating the protective order. The officer asked if I had a safe place to stay, since the apartment was now unlivable. I nodded, but even the hotel no longer felt secure. I moved again to a different hotel under another name. I'm writing this update from there. Peter still hasn't been found, and I'm terrified of what he might try next. Lisa is pushing for an expedited divorce due to the escalating situation, but legal processes remain slow. What's hardest is knowing that even if I win legally, I may never recover the money or heirlooms Peter stole. The future I thought I had has been dismantled by the person I trusted most, for a short-lived affair and reckless spending. I'll update again when there are new developments. For now, I'm focused on staying safe and rebuilding from the life Peter destroyed. It's been nearly 2 months since that update. I tried to write many times, but new events kept changing the situation. I think I can finally share the rest now. After my apartment was destroyed and Peter disappeared, police issued a statewide alert. For almost a week, nothing happened. I stayed hidden in the hotel, constantly on edge. Then one Friday, Detective Robson called. They had found Peter's car, abandoned 40 miles away, with his wallet and phone inside, but no sign of him. They treated it as a missing person case and asked if I had any idea where he might be. I didn't. The Peter I thought I knew would never vanish, but the man I'd seen over the last few months was unrecognizable. 2 days later, Rosalind called me in tears. Peter had appeared at her house late at night, disheveled and asking for money. When she questioned him about the police search, he became angry and left. She was afraid to tell me right away, but by morning, she gave me the details. I reported it to Detective Robson, and police began surveillance on her home. Meanwhile, Lisa filed emergency motions to freeze additional accounts Peter had opened secretly, including one Tobias discovered. Days passed with no sightings. Then I received a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the lake park. 2 p.m. Come alone or I disappear for good." Police confirmed it came from a burner phone, but matched Peter's style. They advised me not to go, but said they could monitor the meeting if I agreed. After consulting Lisa, I consented. I arrived early at the park with undercover officers nearby. At 2 p.m., Peter sat beside me without looking up and immediately started talking. He claimed everyone had turned against him and that his life had been ruined over one mistake. He rambled, then finally asked for $20,000 to start over. In return, he said he'd sign the divorce papers and disappear. When I asked about the stolen heirlooms and damage, he dismissed them as unimportant compared to his struggles. Then he grabbed my arm, insisting I go with him to fix everything. I pulled away and refused. Two plainclothes officers stepped in, identified themselves, and Peter ran, but was caught within seconds. That night, Detective Robson informed me Peter was in custody for violating the protective order. In his bag, they found my mother's engagement ring, my bank statements, and a list of addresses, including the hotel where I was staying. At his bail hearing, the judge denied release, citing him as a danger. The divorce ruling came soon after. The judge granted it on grounds of fraud and adultery, awarded me the house and cabin, and ordered Peter to repay the stolen funds and cover my legal fees. Criminal charges for property destruction, fraud, and violating the protective order were left to separate proceedings. Lisa warned me that recovering money would be difficult since Peter had already spent most of it. We filed liens on any future income, but I had to prepare for the reality I might never be repaid. A week later, Peter's father, Ralph, asked to meet. He felt guilty for not recognizing his son's actions sooner and gave me a cashier's check for $25,000 to help me start over. After some thought, I accepted, agreeing to use part of it to restore the cabin. Peter later accepted a plea deal, 18 months in jail, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and 5 years probation. The agreement also included restitution as part of the divorce. As for Kayla, I've had no contact since the court hearings. It's been 6 months since all this began. I sold the house. It held too many bad memories, and moved to a new apartment. I've been slowly replacing what was lost and rebuilding my savings. The money may never be fully recovered, but I'm finally moving forward. Thank you to everyone who supported me through this.